This man is Richard Murphy, Richard D. Murphy, if you like. He is an emeritus professor and an economist. Not a great economist, I would say, because he doesn't appear to have heard of Major Douglas. But I would rather see him running the country's accounts than Rachel from accounts, Rachel Reeves. However, he has, well, we all have flaws, but his biggest flaw is a pathological hatred of Donald Trump. And on February 28th, he trashed Trump, not for the first time, not for the nth time. He branded him a fascist and said he, Trump, wanted to, well, destroy the press, control the press, yada, yada, yada. Here he is in his own words.
Trump is marching on the freedom of the press in the USA, and I find that deeply troubling. What we now know is that after all his years of calling the press all sorts of names, he is beginning to take action to limit its freedoms. One of the ways in which the press has functioned in the USA is to hold the president to account. This role of the press is absolutely fundamental to the working of a democracy. Without a press that can have access to the people in power and ask them whatever questions they want, and then freely report the answers with discussion of those answers being permitted, there is no such thing as a functioning democracy. But what we now know is that without any consultation or any prior announcement, Donald Trump's press secretary has told the press pack who attend the White House that they will no longer be invited if they do not say what Donald Trump approves of. Trump is trampling all over the freedom of the press and, as a consequence, over the right to freedom of speech in the USA. Now, there is nothing that should surprise us about this. Trump is, after all, a fascist, and what he's doing is straight out of the fascist playbook.
I find it difficult to believe that a man who's obviously very intelligent can be so pig ignorant. Trump is a fascist. Trump is downsizing the American government, the deep state, the administrative state, whatever you want to call it, the bureaucracy. When in history has any fascist ever done that? Fascism is by definition big government. It's government dictating to industry and industry doing what it's told. Trump is, I'd say, at war with the bureaucracy, but he realises that the mess America is in now was caused primarily by the bureaucracy and also by the Biden administration, which opened the floodgates and allowed in 12 million, perhaps more, illegal immigrants from all over the world, encouraged them to come into the country. And look what that did. Before discussing what Trump has really done to the so-called free press, I want to discuss briefly the dangers of bureaucracy and why it got so bad. In 1984, a court case led to a doctrine called Chevron deference. This was overturned last year thanks to Trump having appointed Conservatives to the Supreme Court. But the Chevron deference doctrine allowed, in effect and in reality, bureaucracies to make their own laws, their own rules, and impose them on the rest of us. There are numerous examples of this, but here is one horrible example. In 2007, the National Marine Fisheries Service decided it wanted to put observers on fishing boats to ensure that they didn't break rules when catching fish. Fish had to be above a certain size, etc. And fishermen were forced to pay the salaries of these monitors, which amounted to $700 a day. Imagine you're a small fishing boat owner or a small fleet even. $700 a day. I mean, how many fish would you have to sell for that? That's just one example. I'll give you another one. A few years ago, a good few years ago now, somebody came up with a new design for a brace for disabled people, veterans, etc., to use with firearms. Here's a picture of one. Then what happened was that the people who deal with the firearms, the agency concerned, decided that these braces were illegal, and overnight hundreds, maybe thousands of disabled people will be criminalised. Just like that. Agencies making up laws on the fly without any oversight. Now, this happens all over the place at a local level. Your local council will have bylaws about things like drinking in public places, smoking perhaps, dumping rubbish, noise. But these are subject to some sort of oversight. But these agencies were just making stuff up. And Trump has put a stop to all that. His Supreme Court, although he wasn't in power last year, his Supreme Court put a stop to that. And now he's downsizing the deep state, the administrative state. This state is something that Murphy seems to approve of, when it's done a lot of damage to America, for example, by promoting sexual perversion in Africa, which, African nations, Africans generally, are vehemently opposed to homosexuality and anything close to it. And ludicrous. One example was that this aid agency had donated or given ostensibly $20 million to put on Sesame Street shows in Iraq. I mean, seriously? This is all public money, taxpayers' money, whatever. Trump has put a stop to this, and because of that, he's a fascist. The claim that Trump is at war with the press, trying to destroy the free press or control it, is complete nonsense. It was the Biden regime that did that, and I use the word regime knowingly. They'd found a way to censor people via the back door, as it were. There were numerous government agencies, about 50 of them, which had direct lines to Facebook and other social media, and they were giving these organisations, these websites, these companies, orders to suppress. The Hunter Biden laptop is a big one, because if that had been well publicised, Trump would have won in 2020, no doubt. The COVID lockdowns, the truth about COVID, all sorts of other things, they were literally telling these internet companies to suppress, to remove content and to suppress it, something called shadow banning, something to which I've been subjected very, very vociferously. Trump has put a stop to this. He's kicked Associated Press out of the White House, out of the briefing room, and Murphy sees this as an attack on the press. No. What he's actually done is he's widened the circle of people who have access to the White House briefing room. And here is his dynamic press secretary, Caroline Levitt, explaining exactly what happened here.
A federal judge denied the Associated Press's emergency motion for a temporary restraining order against myself, our Deputy Chief of Staff Taylor Budowich, and our Chief of Staff Susie Wiles for our decision to remove the Associated Press from the White House press pool for certain and special events. The judge's ruling, upholding our decision to deny the Associated Press such privileged access, reinforces the truth. And it reiterates what I said from this podium last week when that suit was filed. Asking the President of the United States questions in limited spaces such as the Oval Office and Air Force One is a privilege that unfortunately has only been granted to a few. It is not a legal right for all.
That should be good enough for Murphy. Donald Trump has done massive numbers of interviews. He's been interviewed by Tim Pool and by Joe Rogan, and he always, I mean, the amount of time he's given to the press and to ordinary people is absolutely staggering. This guy is 78 years old, don't forget, 78. And he chose, instead of enjoying his golden years with his grandkids and potting around on the golf courses, decided to do this. One thing I haven't mentioned is the hatred and vitriol he suffered over the years with this garbage about Russian collusion and everything else. Frankly, I'm astounded that he'd give any of these lowlifes the time of day, because as far as the mainstream goes, apart from Fox News, one or two others like New Nation, he's been treated absolutely abominably and still is. So anyway, that's my refutation of Donald Trump, fascist and enemy of the free press.